You may not notice it at first. One ordinary morning, you wake up and something feels slightly heavier than it used to. Your body moves a little slower, your thoughts linger a little longer. Nothing dramatic happens, and yet this is often how life quietly changes after 70. Not with a loud warning, but with small habits that seem harmless, even familiar. If you are watching this now, there is a reason. Perhaps you felt tired this morning. Perhaps you rushed past a feeling you could not name. Or perhaps you simply wanted a voice to sit with you for a while. This video is not here to frighten you. It is here to gently remind you how easily time slips through ordinary moments. Many people believe the big mistakes are loud and obvious, but the truth is softer. The most serious regrets often begin with simple mornings, repeated without thought. Days pass, weeks blend together, and slowly, without noticing, life becomes smaller. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video if quiet reflections help you. Subscribe if you want more stories about aging, memory, and wisdom. And in the comments, share one small habit your mornings always begin with. Someone else may recognize themselves in your words. Stay until the end of this story, and when it finishes, consider watching another video from this channel where similar reflections continue. For now, let us begin with the regret, the one that appears when time has moved on.
There is a moment that comes quietly. It does not arrive with pain or drama. It arrives one ordinary day, often when nothing special is happening. You might be sitting alone, or standing by a window, or waiting for the kettle to boil. And suddenly, a thought settles in your chest. I thought I would have more time. This is the first regret many people carry into old age. Not a single mistake, but a pattern, a long habit of postponing life, of saying later so often that later slowly disappeared. When you were younger, time felt wide and generous. Days were full, but the future felt endless. You told yourself you would rest later, you would travel later, you would say what mattered later. You believed there would always be another chance, another season, another version of yourself who would finally be ready. So you worked, you endured, you waited. Careers are often the first place this regret takes root. Many people chose safety over meaning, not because they were wrong, but because they were afraid. Afraid of instability, of judgment, of failing in front of others. They told themselves the job was temporary, that one day they would change direction. One day they would do something that felt like their own. But years passed. Responsibilities grew heavier. Children needed care. Bills needed paying. Energy slowly thinned. And the dream that once felt urgent became something you spoke about less and less, until one day you realized you had not thought about it in years. The regret does not come from working hard. It comes from never asking when enough was enough. Relationships carry a similar weight. Many people believed there would be time to fix things later, time to apologize, time to listen more carefully, time to say the words that felt uncomfortable. They stayed silent to keep the peace. They avoided difficult conversations to prevent conflict. They assumed love would wait. But people change. Distance grows quietly. One missed conversation becomes many. One unresolved feeling turns into a habit of silence. And then one day the person you meant to talk to is no longer there in the same way, or not there at all. The regret is not always about what was said wrong. It is often about what was never said at all. Dreams also fade this way, not suddenly, but gently. A hobby you loved, a place you wanted to see, a version of yourself you imagined becoming. Life did not stop you outright, it simply distracted you.
It filled your days with practical needs and small urgencies until there was no space left for longing. You told yourself you were being responsible, mature, realistic, and in many ways you were. But deep inside, something waited, quietly, patiently, hoping to be noticed again. Old age brings clarity, not because people become wiser overnight, but because time removes the illusion of endless chances. You begin to see your life as a whole, not as a series of open possibilities, and that is when the regret sharpens. You realize that waiting was a choice, not always a conscious one, but a choice nonetheless. Many people are surprised by how painful this realization feels. It is not loud grief, it is a dull, steady ache, a sense that life was happening and you were always preparing to live it later. There is also regret in the way happiness was postponed. People often believed happiness was something that would arrive after certain conditions were met, after retirement, after financial security, after children grew up, after problems were solved. So they endured unhappy years with the promise of future joy. They told themselves this was temporary, that sacrifice now would lead to peace later. But happiness does not arrive all at once. It lives in small moments, and when those moments are ignored for too long, the ability to notice them weakens. In old age, many people look back and realize they were surrounded by life, but rarely present in it. They were always moving towards something else. Another layer of this regret comes from self-denial. Many people spent their lives being what others needed them to be: a reliable worker, a supportive partner, a strong parent. They learned to silence their own needs to keep everything else stable. They told themselves this was love, and often it was, but it was also forgetting themselves. By the time they reached old age, they sometimes struggled to answer a simple question: what did I want? Not what was expected, not what was practical, but what genuinely mattered to them. The regret is not selfish, it is human. It comes from realizing you lived carefully, but not always honestly. There is also regret in the way people treated their own bodies and minds. Many ignored exhaustion, ignored stress, ignored quiet warnings. They told themselves they would rest later when life slowed down. But the body remembers everything. Years of neglect do not disappear when responsibilities end, and the regret is not about aging itself. It is about not listening sooner. What makes this regret so heavy is that it cannot be fixed in the usual way. You cannot go back and start over. You cannot reclaim the years spent waiting. You can only look at them. This is when loneliness begins to form even before people are physically alone, because this regret is deeply personal. It lives inside, often unspoken. It is difficult to explain to others without feeling foolish or ungrateful. Many older people tell themselves they should not feel this way, that they had a good life, that others had it worse, and so they push the regret down, where it grows quieter but heavier. At night, it sometimes surfaces, in memories, in dreams, in thoughts that arrive uninvited. You remember moments when you could have chosen differently, not dramatically differently, just slightly. One conversation, one decision, one honest admission, and you wonder how your life might have felt. This regret does not mean life was wasted. It means life was lived with caution, with patience, with delay. And now time feels more precious than ever. As this realization settles in, something else begins to appear alongside it. A sense of distance from others, from the world, from the life you once rushed through. And slowly, almost without noticing, the feeling of being alone grows stronger, preparing the way for the next quiet truth.
Loneliness in old age does not always mean being alone. This is something many people misunderstand until they feel it themselves. You can have family. You can have people who call you, who visit on holidays, who ask if you are well. And still, inside, there can be a deep sense of distance that is difficult to explain. This kind of loneliness grows quietly.
It does not begin with abandonment, it begins with small changes. Conversations become shorter, shared experiences become fewer. You notice that people speak to you, but not with you. They update you about their lives, but rarely ask about your inner world. Over time, you stop offering it. You learn that others are busy. Their lives are full, fast, and demanding. You tell yourself not to be a burden, not to repeat stories, not to slow anyone down. So you listen more than you speak, you smile more than you reveal, and slowly your inner life becomes something you carry alone. This is the loneliness many older people live with, not dramatic, not visible, but constant. Friendships change first. Old friends move away, fall ill, or pass on. New friendships are harder to form, not because the desire is gone, but because the rhythm of life no longer brings people together easily. Work once provided daily connection. Parenting once created shared purpose. When these roles fade, so do the natural bridges to others. You may still see people, but less often. And when you do, the conversations are lighter, safer. There is less room for honesty. Many older people notice that their emotions feel out of place in younger spaces. Their worries seem slower, deeper, harder to explain. So they keep them inside, not because no one cares, but because it feels easier than trying to be understood. Family relationships also change in subtle ways. Children grow into adults with their own priorities. They love you, but they no longer need you in the same way. Decisions are made without your input. Traditions change. Your role shifts from central to peripheral. This transition can feel like a quiet loss of identity. You may find yourself missing not just people, but the feeling of being needed, of being relied upon, of having your presence make a difference in someone's daily life. When that fades, loneliness deepens, even in a full house. There are also words that remain unspoken, old disagreements that were never resolved, apologies that felt too late, gratitude that was assumed but never expressed. As time passes, these unsaid words grow heavier. You replay conversations in your mind. You imagine different endings. You wonder how things might have felt if you had spoken sooner or listened more carefully. But now the moment has passed, and silence has taken its place. Psychologically, loneliness in old age is complex. It is not only about social contact, it is about emotional connection, about being seen and understood as you are now, not as who you used to be. Many older people feel invisible, not ignored intentionally, but overlooked. Their stories feel outdated, their pace feels slow, their concerns feel less urgent to a world that moves quickly forward. This invisibility can be more painful than physical isolation. There is also the loss of shared history. When people who knew you in your younger years are gone, parts of your identity feel lost with them. There are memories no one else remembers, versions of you that exist only in your mind. You may sit quietly and realize that if you were to disappear, entire chapters of life would disappear too. This thought can be unsettling. Loneliness also changes how time feels. Days stretch longer, evenings feel heavier, silence becomes louder. Without regular emotional exchange, the mind turns inward. Thoughts loop, memories repeat, regrets resurface. Sleep becomes lighter, nights feel longer. Some people try to fill this loneliness with distractions. Television plays in the background, radios stay on for company. But these sounds do not replace connection. They only soften the edges of silence. Others withdraw further, believing that loneliness is simply part of aging. They accept it as inevitable, but inside there is still a quiet longing to be known, to be heard, to be close to someone again. It is important to understand that this loneliness is not a personal failure. It is a natural response to loss, change, and transition. Life slowly removes roles, relationships, and routines that once provided meaning. And when those structures fall away, the emotional ground beneath you can feel unstable. Many older people also struggle with expressing loneliness. They fear sounding ungrateful. They tell themselves they should be content. They compare themselves to others who seem worse off, so they minimize their feelings. But loneliness does not respond to logic, it responds to connection. And when connection feels out of reach, the pain remains, quiet but persistent. As years pass, memories begin to take on a new role. They become companions. When people feel distant, the past feels close. When conversations fade, remembered voices grow louder. You start to spend more time with what once was, not because you want to escape the present, but because the present feels empty in certain ways. Photographs are looked at more often. Old songs carry more weight. Familiar places, even in memory, offer comfort. And slowly, almost without noticing, the world of memory becomes richer than the world around you. This is the point where loneliness and memory begin to intertwine, where the past starts to feel more alive than the present, where silence invites reflection, and in that silence, memories begin to speak.
As people grow older, memories begin to change their shape. They are no longer simple recollections of the past. They become places the mind returns to, often without permission. A sound, a smell, a quiet afternoon can open a door that has been closed for years, and suddenly you are not fully in the present anymore. Nostalgia is not just remembering, it is feeling time again. In younger years, memories sit lightly. They come and go. But in old age, they carry more weight. They arrive slowly and stay longer. They fill the quiet spaces left behind by people, routines, and roles that have faded. You may find yourself remembering childhood with unusual clarity. A narrow street, a familiar tree, the sound of footsteps in the evening, the way light fell through a window. These details return not because they were important at the time, but because they belonged to a period when life felt open and unfinished. Psychologically, nostalgia grows stronger when the present feels uncertain or thin. When the future feels short, the mind turns backward, searching for continuity. It wants to feel whole again. It wants to remember who you were before life became heavy with responsibility and loss. Old friends appear often in these memories, people you have not seen for decades, people's voices you can still hear clearly. You remember how you laughed together, how time passed without effort, how connection felt natural, not planned. You wonder where they are now, or if they are still alive. Sometimes the pain of nostalgia does not come from what was bad, but from what was good, from moments that felt complete but did not last. The mind returns to them not to suffer, but to feel something familiar and warm again. This is why memories can hurt more than failures. Failures can be explained, they can be justified. You can tell yourself you did your best, but memories of happiness carry a different ache. They remind you of what was possible, of versions of life that existed, even briefly. You may remember a conversation where you felt truly understood, a time when your body moved freely, a period when hope felt natural. These memories whisper softly, "This was once real," and then they fade again. There is also regret woven into nostalgia. Not regret for obvious mistakes, but for missed presence, for moments when you were physically there, but emotionally elsewhere. When you were thinking about tomorrow instead of noticing today.
You remember a child's voice that you half listened to, a partner's expression you overlooked, a peaceful moment you rushed through. At the time, these moments seemed ordinary. Now they feel precious. The psychology of memory is not fair. It does not return everything evenly. It selects moments charged with emotion, joy, loss, longing, and it replays them quietly, often at night when distractions are gone. Silence gives memories room to breathe. As the body slows, the mind often becomes more active. There is less doing, more remembering, less movement, more reflection. This is not weakness, it is a natural shift inward. But this inward movement can be overwhelming. You may notice that certain memories repeat, the same scenes, the same conversations, the same questions. Why did I not stay longer? Why did I leave so soon? Why did I think there would always be more time? These thoughts do not seek answers, they seek understanding. There are also sensory memories that return with force. The smell of rain on warm ground, the sound of a radio playing in another room, the feel of a specific place that no longer exists as it once did. These sensations arrive suddenly, often without context, and for a moment you are there again, fully present in a time that has passed. When the moment ends, the present can feel strangely distant. Some people worry that living in memory means being stuck, but often it is the opposite. Memory becomes a way to integrate a life that now feels fragmented. It allows the mind to connect past selves with the present one. In remembering, you are trying to make sense of who you have been. There is also a quiet comparison that happens. You compare who you are now with who you were then, not critically, but gently. You notice the differences, the losses, the growth. This comparison can bring sadness, but it can also bring tenderness. You may feel compassion for your younger self, for how little they knew, for how much they carried, for how often they were afraid. Regret softens when it is seen through this lens, not as failure, but as limitation, as being human within the time and understanding you had. Nostalgia can become harmful when it turns into escape, when the present is avoided completely. But when held gently, it can offer comfort. It can remind you that your life was real, rich, and layered. Even pain becomes meaningful in memory. As people age, they often stop chasing resolution. They begin seeking acceptance, not happiness in the loud sense, but peace. Memories, even painful ones, can help with this. They show that life was not empty, that it contained connection, effort, emotion, and care. You begin to understand that regret does not mean life failed, it means life mattered. There is a point where nostalgia shifts. It no longer pulls you backward, it stands beside you. It becomes a quiet companion, not a wound. You may still feel the ache, but it is softer now, less sharp, more understanding. You start to hold your memories with open hands instead of clenched ones. And in this holding, something changes. The past no longer accuses you, it simply exists. This is where acceptance begins. Not forgetting, not erasing regret, but allowing your life to be what it was, without constant resistance. The mind grows quieter here. Memories still come, but they no longer overwhelm. They sit with you like old photographs on a table. You look at them when you want, you feel what you feel, and then you return to the present, carrying their weight more lightly. This quiet acceptance prepares the ground for something else, not advice, not instruction, but understanding. A wisdom that does not shout, that does not insist. A wisdom that arrives only after memory has finished speaking.
Wisdom in old age does not arrive as clear answers. It arrives as a change in how questions are held. After years of regret, memory, and quiet loneliness,
something soft begins to settle. Not happiness in the way it is often described, but a calm understanding of what truly mattered all along. This wisdom does not announce itself. It appears slowly in ordinary moments, while sitting alone, while watching light move across a wall, while listening to a familiar sound. You begin to notice that many of the things you once worried about no longer carry weight. What remains feels simpler. One of the first understandings is about time, not how much of it is left, but how it was spent. You realize that time was never meant to be filled completely. It was meant to be felt. The rush, the constant planning, the pressure to use time well, all of that now feels unnecessary. You see that the most meaningful moments were rarely planned. They happened in between, in pauses, in quiet conversations, in shared silence. This understanding does not come with regret anymore. It comes with gentleness. You also begin to understand people differently. You see how much of life was shaped by fear, fear of loss, fear of judgment, fear of being alone. You recognize this fear in yourself and in others. With this recognition comes forgiveness, not dramatic forgiveness, but a quiet release. You stop replaying old conflicts with the same intensity. You see that most people were doing the best they could with what they knew at the time. This does not erase pain, but it softens it. Another piece of wisdom appears around control. For much of life, you believed things could be managed if you tried hard enough, if you planned carefully, if you made the right choices. Age reveals how limited that control always was. Illness, loss, change, these things arrived regardless of effort. Instead of bitterness, there is often relief in this understanding. You no longer blame yourself for everything that did not work out. You see how much was shaped by circumstances beyond your reach. This brings a strange kind of peace. You also begin to value presence over progress. For most of life, attention was directed forward, toward goals, toward improvement, toward what came next. Now there is less urgency to move. Sitting becomes enough. Noticing becomes enough. You may find yourself enjoying small things more deeply than you ever did before. The warmth of a drink, the sound of rain, the comfort of a familiar chair. These moments do not promise a better future. They simply exist, and that is enough. This wisdom understands that life does not need to be extraordinary to be meaningful. There is also a clearer understanding of relationships. You see that it was never about how many people were in your life, but about how present you were with the few who mattered. You remember moments of genuine connection more than years of activity. You understand now that love was expressed in simple ways, showing up, listening, staying, and you forgive yourself for not always knowing that sooner. Another quiet truth emerges about identity. For much of life, you defined yourself by roles, work, family, responsibility. When those roles faded, you felt lost. Now you see that you were always more than those labels. There is a self beneath the roles, a steady presence that remained even as everything else changed. This understanding brings comfort. You are not only what you produced or achieved, you are what you felt, what you noticed, what you cared about. Wisdom also reshapes how regret is held. Regret does not disappear, but it loses its sharpness. It becomes part of the landscape of a life fully lived. You see that a life without regret would have required perfect knowledge, and no one ever has that. You stop asking why you did not know sooner. You accept that knowing sooner would have made you someone entirely else. There is acceptance in this. You also begin to understand silence differently. Silence no longer feels empty, It feels spacious. It allows thoughts to settle. It allows emotions to pass without being forced away. You become more comfortable being alone, even if loneliness still visits. You know now that being alone does not always mean being disconnected. Sometimes it simply means being with yourself. This wisdom does not push you to change the world. It does not ask you to make up for lost time. It simply invites you to be where you are without resistance. There is also a quiet awareness of mortality, not fear, but recognition. Life feels finite in a way it never did before. This awareness does not make moments heavier, it makes them clearer. You notice what is worth your attention and what is not. Small conflicts lose importance. Proving something feels unnecessary. You let go more easily. You hold less tightly. You may even feel gratitude, not constant, not overwhelming, but present. Gratitude for having lived long enough to understand these things, even if understanding came late. This wisdom knows that life did not owe you clarity earlier. It arrived when it could. There is no urge to teach or instruct others loudly. You understand now that wisdom cannot be transferred easily. It has to be lived into, discovered slowly. So you carry it quietly. In conversations, you listen more, you speak less. When you do speak, your words are softer. You no longer need to be right, you only need to be honest. There is dignity in this quietness. As days pass, you feel less pressure to make them count in any grand way. Simply being present feels sufficient. You wake up, you notice, you rest, you remember, you let go. This rhythm feels natural now. The final understanding is perhaps the simplest. Life was never meant to be mastered. It was meant to be experienced, with confusion, with mistakes, with moments of clarity that arrived too late to change the past, but just in time to soften it. And so you sit with your life as it is, not wishing it were different, not trying to add meaning, just allowing it to be. There is no conclusion here, no lesson neatly wrapped, only a quiet sense of completion. The world continues, time moves on, and you remain, breathing gently, carrying your life with you. Not loudly, not perfectly, just peacefully.